afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be in the world today. Thank you so much for taking part in today's final bootcamp session of a three-part series that I've been delivering over the last couple of weeks, really focused on building, pricing, marketing, and selling your security services to a traditional type of MSP client. This used to be a very long 3-hour boot camp, but I have decided to revamp the boot camp, spend some time on each section, and it now has been broken into 3 separate topics. So a couple of weeks ago, we started with how do you build security programs? And so we talked about, what goes into program design, why are we building programs the way they are, what are the features in it, and then we also reviewed a sample security programs matrix where we talked about our essential security program and our advanced security program. And then in last week's boot camp, we talked about how do you price those offerings, because that is the number one question that I typically get asked by MSPs is, how do I price X? And so last week's boot camp went into how do you price an essentials program, how do you price an advanced program, what are the different components that you should think about when you're considering your pricing. And now today's final boot camp is all around how do I go out and market and sell these new security programs that I've just delivered, because typically, if you're going to talk to one of your existing clients, you're switching it up, you're trying to get them into one of these new programs that you've just built, they're going to cost more. And likely you might receive some pushback, or you might receive, some objections. And so this boot camp is really focused on how do you address and deal with those objections, with that pushback, especially from the pricing perspective that you may hear. So if you haven't attended any of my boot camps in the past, my name is Stefanie Hammond. I am the head nerd that's responsible for all things sales and marketing related. I have been with Enable for about 20 years now, had a variety of different roles. You can see my contact information there on the screen, my email. I'm on LinkedIn, so if you're on LinkedIn, we should be linked together. Just a couple of housekeeping before we jump into things. Everyone's on mute. That's just to maintain call quality. But if you do have any questions that come up, if you're having any audio video issues, I'll do my best to try and answer them, but just throw them into the question panel. If I'm not able to answer all of the questions live during today's session, I do commit to getting an answer back to you likely tomorrow, because I am delivering this boot camp this afternoon. So, but if you do put in a question, I do commit to getting an answer back to you. This session is being recorded because it is a brand new session, and in a couple of weeks, this will be cleaned up. It will be uploaded into Enable U, and if you wanted to listen to it again, or if you wanted to pass it along to other team members to listen, it will be available there. If for some reason you would like a copy of this recording sooner than that, just get me on LinkedIn, send me an email, put it in the question panel, and I can get you a copy of this raw recording over to you for your review. So just to kind of recap where we are currently in kind of my whole MSP growth planning process for those that might be new. As I mentioned, this is the final session of a 3-part bootcamp series that was really focused on how do you build, price, market, sell security to a traditional managed services client, meaning that they don't have any internal IT, so they're looking to you and your MSP to be their outsourced IT. Starting in a couple of weeks, we're going to be flipping it and going up market, and I'm going to be talking about how do you build, price, market, and sell co-managed services. And so if you're not familiar with co-managed, this is really about moving up market and partnering with larger organizations where there's already an internal IT person or department in-house. And so you're not going in there to kind of take over the whole network like you are with the traditional managed services client, but what you're doing is you're going to work in and really augment the existing team that's on site. And so if this is a market that you are thinking of pursuing, coming up in a couple of weeks, I have 2 boot camps that I'm going to be delivering on how do you build co-managed programs. So that's part 1. We're going to be reviewing the top programs that we see MSPs take to market. How do you price them? What are the services that are you included? And then part 2 is how do I go out, market, sell, so I can, kind of win my first set of co-managed clients if I don't have any today. So that's really what's coming up in the next couple of weeks. So this boot camp series, I think if you attended either part 1 or part 2, I developed it because I seem to get asked on a weekly basis, how should I be pricing my programs? Or what should I be pricing for X? Or how much should I be charging? And if you've attended the last 2 boot camps, you would have heard me say that I think this is a very difficult question to answer because it doesn't have a simple answer. And if you did attend boot camps 1 and 2, hopefully you can appreciate it when I said, I really can't tell you that because it really depends on what you're selling and who you're selling to. So we did aim to answer hopefully those questions in boot camp 1 and boot camp 2. And so this final session of this 3-part series is really now around how do you position, how do you communicate the value of these new security programs that you've delivered or developed, and then what are some of the techniques to help you overcome, some of the inevitable pricing objections and pushback that you're likely going to hear. So we are going to review some strategies on how do you start the security and risk and compliance conversation with both existing clients and with new prospects you might be speaking with. And then we're going to be reviewing the top 12 most common objections that I typically hear. I used to hear it all the time when I managed accounts. These are objections that MSPs have told me, and we will go through those with sample responses for that. Now, as I'm going through everything, and if you happen to miss boot camps 1 and boot camp 2, coming soon, I'm in the middle of putting together a comprehensive guide on how to sell security. So I'm calling it Defend and Prosper, Maximizing the Cybersecurity Sales Opportunity. And this is really kind of taking all of my 5 boot camps that I have dedicated to this topic and putting it into hopefully a very good comprehensive guide that MSPs can hopefully leverage. So everything that I'm going through today, everything that I went through in the first 2 boot camps, everything I'm going to be going through in the co-managed is going to be in this guide. I'm about 80% of the way done, so hopefully I'll have this available in the next couple of weeks once it gets approved through content, and so keep an eye out for when I start marketing for that. All right, so you've crafted your new security programs. We have our new pricing in place for both our Essentials program and our Advanced Security package. We're now ready to start selling. So where do we start? And I think the best place to start is to go after your low-hanging fruit first. Because when we talk about growing your MSP, increasing the recurring revenue with respect to managed services and that side of your business, there's really only 3 ways that we can do that, right? We can win and sign on more clients. Fantastic. We can get our existing clients to spend more with us, and we can get our existing clients to spend more with us more often. And so looking at this from a marketing perspective, yep, we're going to put a plan in place. We want to attract and sign on new clients. We want to get them enrolled into our new security programs, but we don't want to discount the revenue and the growth opportunities that you can achieve by also focusing on your existing clients as well. And there's a lot of great success that you can initially garner by focusing on your cross-selling and upselling opportunities and targeting your existing clients first in attempt to kind of standardize them in one of your new programs and increase the monthly fees, the MRR that you are generating off of them. So if you ever attended any of the service leadership webinars, they used to be hosted by Paul Dipple before he retired. One of the stats that he always gave in his talks was how much it costs to bring in a new client. Now, when I first started listening to him, the number that he used to reference was it used to cost about, I think, $23,000 for a new client to be brought on by an MSP. When I listened to him last before he retired, I think about a couple of years ago, it now costs $30,000 to $32,000 for an MSP to bring on a new client. And you might be thinking that this is a little bit high, but this is including, all of your sales and marketing salaries, all of that overhead, all of the marketing, like everything that you think about that goes into bringing a new client on board is in the range of $30,000 to $32,000 on average. So that's one of the bigger reasons why I always encourage MSPs to focus their marketing and sales efforts on account management and on your existing clients first, because it takes a lot of time and effort and money to source, woo, and sign on new clients. But with your existing clients, You've already done that work, right? Your existing clients, they already know you, they know your organization, they know the quality of work that you do, you've built a relationship with them, hopefully a partnership. So these are the perfect types of businesses that you can practice your sales pitch on. You know, these types of customers, they can be your guinea pigs. They can give you that constructive feedback and advice for when you begin selling to organizations that really don't know your MSP at all. And your existing clients, they're the ones that are going to be able to help you and your team with the different objections and the pushback that you likely are going to hear. And you can kind of practice your response and how you're going to address their concerns, you know, when you tell them that you're raising their prices on them. You know, they'll give you some good practice. But you can also use your existing clients to help you iron out some of the technical deliverables, the service delivery, the onboarding processes. This can provide kind of that real world training for your tech and service staff, especially if you've had to go and introduce new technologies into your security tech stack that maybe you weren't used previously. And then from a marketing perspective, these customers are golden, right? Like once you get them going and kind of standardized on whether it's your essentials or your advanced program, this is where we can kind of go back to them and, you know, see if we can get some quotes, see if we can get some testimonials, see if we can get some case studies written about them that we can then post to our website, utilize in social media, because that's what's going to be needed to kind of sell to new clients when we're ready to do that. So to help with your planning process, I always encourage partners to do what I call a services white space matrix. The idea, the purpose behind this white space matrix is to really show you which of your clients are buying what services from you and what clients are not buying certain services from you. So you can kind of see what, you know, where the money is being left on the table. And then this will then give you the guidance as to where your sales opportunities lie within your existing customer base. And it will give you the direction as to which customers you might be reaching out first to speak about, you know, standardize them in one of your two programs. So it's very, very easy to create a services white space matrix. Really all you have to do is just open up an Excel spreadsheet. Along the top, list out every single MRR service that you may sell individually today. Then down the side, we're going to list out all of your clients. And then for each client, what you do is you just start kind of checking off, you know, those services that those clients have with you that they're paying for. And then at the end, kind of tally up what their monthly spend is with you. And so by doing this exercise, hopefully you can see quite quickly, you know, what services each client has with you, what services are clearly missing, you know, because we're going to be comparing it to our new standard bundle of either the essential program or the advanced program. And so you're going to know where your upgrade opportunities lie. Now, this used to be something that I used to do all the time when I was in sales. You know, fairly regularly we had, you know, territory shifts. So anytime I moved into a new territory, this was an exercise that I quickly did because I needed to see out of the 125 new partners that I was going to get to know, I needed to know who had what. And so I would do, I called it a product white space matrix because I needed to know what enabled products they had and what enabled products they didn't have. And then I used that to kind of help set my direction in terms of who I reached out to first. And so the idea is that once you've kind of completed the white space matrix, you know, and there's a couple of different ways that you can attack it, but the ultimate goal is that you want to set up a meeting with each of those clients. Now you can maybe start at the top and, you know, maybe you have a bunch of clients where they have mostly everything that's in your advanced program or your essentials program, but maybe they're just missing a couple of features. So the change in MRR isn't going to be that drastic for them. And so maybe those are the easier ones to go after, you know, get them standardized in your new advanced security package, you know, get that, the delta between what they're paying now versus what your new plan costs. Or you may want to, you know, go for the gusto and start at the bottom and target those customers of yours that deviate the most from your standard package. Like maybe they're your time material customers, or maybe they're your a la carte customers where they have maybe just backup with you or something. And so you need to kind of upgrade them fairly substantially into either your essentials or your advanced program. So the jump in the MRR that you're going to get from them is going to be pretty substantial. So you may want to go that way, or you may want to kind of start at the top, start at the bottom, and work your way through the middle. So there's a couple of different ways that you can tackle your next steps once you complete that services white space matrix. But some good things to bring to that meeting that can kind of help justify why these changes are being mandated to them. There's a lot of different security reports that are out there, so you may want to bring a security report that really discusses the changing threat landscape. This is information that you can use to help educate your customer if they're not really familiar with it already and they have their head in the sand around what's happening in the world today, to help them help you really justify why you are making the changes that you're making. You definitely do want to bring your new master services agreement that outlines your new program that you would like to enroll them in. And again, if you're dealing with customers that are in regulated industries, so if they have to abide by HIPAA or PCI or GDPR or anything like that, they automatically should be positioned into your advanced security program, because it just has the feature set that is really for compliance forward type of organizations. And then any of your customers that aren't involved in a regulated industry, or maybe they're time and material, maybe they're a la carte, maybe they're smaller, then that's your essentials program. That's your minimum viable program that you would enroll all of your clients to. So you are going to need to create new master services agreement that outlines these new programs. And so you want to bring that with you. Along with the monthly fee schedule to let them know and anticipate what their monthly fee is going to go up to. And then you'll have to make the decision that if they refuse to sign your new master services agreement and you still will take them and keep them as a client, you may need to bring something like a hold harmless letter or some other sort of risk acceptance letter that they will need to sign off on that clearly outlines what the consequences are, should they be attacked or infected or ransomed. And always as a reminder, within Market Builder, we have a variety of different campaigns, but we have a campaign in there that's specifically for lining up your executive business reviews with your customers, those meetings, so that you can talk to them about these changes that you need to implement on their account. So if you haven't been into Market Builder, if you're not aware of it, I definitely encourage you to check it out. If you haven't been in a while, there's always new content being added there, so just very easy to access, and I have the URL link there. Now, just before we move into the next set of slides, I do have just a quick poll that I just want to launch. I think it's more of a rhetorical question than anything at this point, but just curious for everyone on the line, are you currently supporting or do you plan to target prospects that reside in a regulated industry? So quickly, yes, we do, or no, we don't. And pretty much just like it was this morning, yes, it's 100%. Yes, we do target support customers in a regulated industry. That's what I thought. Thank you very much. Because again, the reason that I asked this question is as part of that white space exercise, where we're, tallying everything up, their MRR, what services they have and don't have, we also want to add a column to assign them a risk rating so that you can use that to determine which program they ideally should be transitioned into. And so knowing this risk rating and knowing what program they need to be a part of is going to help you really craft your talk track in that security conversation with them. So those that did attend part 1 of my bootcamp a couple of weeks ago, this slide should be fairly recognizable. Really what we're doing is, kind of using this slide to help us with that risk rating. So again, any client that is in a regulated industry, banking, financial, healthcare, government, those customers are considered high risk businesses. And so they have to be directed into your advanced security program because that was designed specifically for, again, compliance centric type of organizations. And then any customer that maybe be smaller in size, You know, they don't really do any processing in-house. They're not regulated. That's kind of the key differentiator between one program and the other. Then you can put them into the Essentials program. I also look at that Essentials program again as those customers that you may have that are time material, or those that are a la carte. And so trying to get them, you know, from a time material type of engagement where they're not really used to spending any money with you on a regular basis, getting them all the way into an advanced program might be a little bit of a leap. So we can use this Essentials program as kind of that stepping stone. So get all your time material clients, standardize them on the Essentials, and then hopefully after a period of time, get them into the advanced after that. So as you start lining up those executive business review meetings with your customers, I thought it might be helpful to include a section in this bootcamp on potential strategies that you can use to really help, you know, jumpstart that security conversation that will help you hopefully be able to position your new security-centric packages and explain why you're moving them over to this new package. And so I'm going to do a blanket apology from here on out. The slides are going to be wordy because I'm trying to give scripting, but all of this information is going to be in that selling security playbook that I'm putting together. So I know it seems a little bit wordy for the slides that I'm going to be showing from here on out, but all of this information will be in that playbook, hopefully in a couple of weeks. And so just kind of my blanket apology there. I know my slides are wordy. So anyway, strategy number one to kind of start that security conversation is really focused around highlighting and bringing up kind of that ever-changing threat landscape, like I mentioned a few moments ago, because I'm sure your customers will not disagree with you when you tell them that security attacks, data breaches, they're just getting to be more and more commonplace these days. So you can start the conversation, you know, something like, you know, Mr. Customer, I'm sure you're hearing and reading in the news how prevalent, you know, security attacks are becoming. Security data breaches are just getting to be more and more commonplace these days. Always helpful to throw some stats at them. So you can say something like, according to a 2023 Verizon Data Breach Investigations report, they say that cyber attacks are going to top $5 trillion by the end of 2024. Some other good stats that you may want to use, you know, there's nearly 20 ransomware attempts reported every second. 80% of these social engineering attacks, they are phishing attacks against users. And cyber criminals, they're getting relentless. You know, the average time between cyber attacks is a mere 39 seconds. So really seeing all of this unfold, you know, this is where as the MSP, maybe you own it to say, look, it's been evident that we need to update our monthly services packages because we have to make them more security centric to provide better protection coverage to our customers, because we don't want any of our customers to fall victim to a cyber attack and becoming a statistic. So unfortunately, what we had been recommending previously is just no longer sufficient. And so now we need to update our security recommendations so that we can accommodate this ever-changing threat landscape. So Mr. Customer, let's set up a time, let's go through what you have in place today, and we can review with you what we're going to be adding to your monthly package so that we can help reduce your risk of attack. Another strategy that you could use is, you know, and this is great because everybody's targeting companies in regulated industries, is use your knowledge of their industry and then kind of own the fact that your existing program structure, again, doesn't really line up to help them adhere to the compliance standards and the regulations that businesses in their vertical need to abide by. And you are now looking to correct this. So you can start the conversation by saying, you know what, Mr. Customer, I know that you're part of XYZ industry. And unfortunately, we haven't been doing that great of a job at advising our clients on how to best help them adhere to the different compliance standards and regulations that businesses in your vertical really need to abide by. And so we're correcting that. We're changing that now through the introduction of our advanced security program that includes compliance and compliance consulting and insights. This is a new program that we're standardizing all of our clients on that reside in your industry. So I would love to set up a time with you. Let's meet, let's go through what you have in place today so we can talk about what we're going to be adding to your monthly package that's going to help you better adhere to the compliance standards that are in place for your industry. And another way you can start the compliance conversation is to really maybe, again, leverage that compliance angle to highlight why things need to change. And so kind of in the same vein. So you can start off by saying, you know, Mr. Customer, again, as a business operating in XYZ industry, compliance standards state that organizations in your vertical, you have to collect and aggregate your log data from the network and then be able to show proof that you can rely on that log data to investigate an incident on the network should a breach occur. And so as your MSP, one of our jobs as your cybersecurity advisor is to be able to help you prove that you can demonstrate compliance when you are asked to do so. You know, with the existing security package that you're in now, we're not able to do that for you. So you're at risk of being labeled non-compliant, and you could potentially face fines if you are subject to an audit. And this is just something we don't want to happen to you. Therefore, we need to transition you into our new advanced security package where we can implement the right set of tool sets, processes, partnerships with the right security controls so that in the event of a breach, we can quickly extract all the necessary data needed to investigate that attack. Because unfortunately, organizations that operate in regulated industries, they don't get a choice whether or not they want to be compliant. So I would love to set up a time with you. Let's review what these new changes are, what the new security controls are going to look like moving forward. Let's leverage the cyber insurance angle and maybe use that as a way to introduce your new security programs. So with this one, I'm thinking here, like, because I've had MSPs tell me that they're starting to have their customers bring to them their cyber liability insurance questionnaire, and they're looking for the MSP's help to complete them. Or there's MSPs that are starting to make it a requirement of their customers that they have to have cyber liability insurance for their business if they are to remain a client of theirs. And so the nice thing of this is that a lot of the items that are being referenced on the cyber insurance questionnaire are pretty much the same security control items that are being requested for compliance purposes. And they map to how we've designed our essentials and advanced program that we talked about in Bootcamp 1. Because the way that the essentials and the advanced program had been designed is not only do they map to, you know, kind of the cyber, the NIST cyber insurance framework, but it also closely maps to a lot of the common cyber liability insurance policies that are out there. So this is something that you can bring up when you're speaking to customers and prospects. So if a customer of yours is coming to you and they're asking you to fill out this questionnaire and you know that they're not enrolled in one of your new standardized programs, this is a fantastic opportunity to have that conversation about your new advanced program and get them transitioned into one of those programs, because honestly, you can't complete that questionnaire correctly or accurately until they're in one of those programs. Because when they do get hit with an attack and things go off the rails, if they can't demonstrate to the insurance company that they have proper email security in place, that they have, you know, protective DNS in place, that they have a password manager in place, that they did enforce MFA, that they have an endpoint detection solution in place, that they have, you know, kind of a managed solution in place from a SOC and SIM perspective, that they're regularly backing up their data. Those types of things, if they're not in place, the insurance company, they may reject the claim. They may invalidate the policy because they're not going to help to pay to recover costs associated with the breach if they feel that the company didn't take the proper measures to put the proper security protocols in place. And they're going to view that client as being liable. And the insurance company is not going to want to pay the claim. So this is another really good opportunity to have that conversation with your clients, especially if they're coming to you for help, you know, because your job is to make sure that your client is doing everything that is required by the cyber liability insurance policy in the event that they do get hit and they have to file a claim, and you want to make sure that there's no issues getting that claim approved and paid. All right. So few strategies to kind of, from an account management perspective, from an EBR perspective, if you need to start that conversation with existing clients because we need to get them upgraded into one of these standard packages. Now I kind of want to flip the coin and let's review some strategies to start the conversation with prospects. If this is the first time that you're getting the opportunity to speak to a new prospect. So if you don't know this information already, it might be useful to ask the prospect, about their history with their existing MSP. So as part of that initial discovery process, this is kind of where we want to be curious and we want to ask them, have they ever experienced a cyber incident in the past? And if they have, we want to find out what that experience was like for them. And so it might be easy just to ask them, on a scale of 1 to 10, how was it handled by their existing MSP? Because hopefully we want to try and find out, how many users were impacted? How did it impact the overall business? How quickly was their MSP able to respond and start the remediation process? How long did they have to keep the doors closed because they were offline? And then, did they lose any data? Was any of their data stolen, lost, or maybe unrecoverable? Because if you're getting kind of some good history or bad history that they did succumb to an attack, that there was some pretty significant impact on the business and maybe they did lose their data, you can kind of respond back with, well, with our advanced security program and the tools and the partnerships and the people and the processes that we have in place, our protection coverage is pretty extensive. We can detect and neutralize a threat within seconds before it can compromise your network and impact your employees and kind of wipe out your data. Or going back to the compliance angle and using that to inquire how compliance is being handled today by their existing MSP. So you can use that to help differentiate yourself from them and maybe any other MSPs that they might be considering. So I'm really glad to hear that 100% of everybody on the call today on the meeting is very comfortable targeting organizations that are in regulated industries. So, you may start the conversation something like, Mr. Prospect, I know you're part of XYZ industry. How is your MSP helping you adhere to the compliance standards that businesses in your industry need to abide by? And what measures do they have in place to help you demonstrate compliance in the event of the breach or in the event that you're audited? Or another way you can phrase this question is, Mr. Prospect, I know that you work with and store valuable customer personal data. What measures does your existing MSP have in place to help mitigate your data disclosure risks from those that might be wanting to steal this type of PII data? Or it may even be as simple as, is your current MSP having the compliance conversation with you? Because not all MSPs are having that compliance conversation. So the customer may not even recognize that they should be having this conversation because their existing MSP isn't talking to them about it. Or we could use the end user angle and ask questions around what is their current MSP doing or maybe not doing to protect their end users from falling victim to an attack so they don't end up being a catalyst for a data breach. So, here you can start by asking, Mr. Prospect, were you aware that 70% of data breaches are actually caused by people? I've seen it as high as 82%, really depending on what reports you read, but that's still 3/4 of data breaches are caused by humans, either because they're making a mistake, the employees are doing something incorrectly or they're not doing something like they should. There's privilege misuse, maybe there's some stolen credentials, maybe there's social engineering or phishing techniques that are being utilized. But at the end of the day, end users, they're a real source of risk for any organization. If we didn't have end users, we wouldn't be experiencing kind of the heightened levels of security issues that we're dealing with today. And without the right protection measures in place, the inherent risk that end users bring to the table is only going to continue to keep organizations exposed. So this is where you can kind of follow up with a question and say, what protection measures does your existing MSP have in place today to kind of lessen the risk that it's going to be the employee or an employee that's going to be the catalyst to a data breach for your organization? And then, if you're asking all these questions of your prospect and the prospect's just kind of shrugging their shoulders and they're saying, well, I don't actually know what they're doing, then, this is where maybe you can leverage your security assessment process to highlight gaps in the protection coverage that's currently being overlooked or maybe even missed, by the competition. And then you can use this to really educate your prospect on these deficiencies, and then how your MSP can really help address those deficiencies and close those security and compliance gaps, because you have, an advanced security package that you enroll all of your customers in to help with that. So you can ask other probing questions like, if they're shrugging their shoulders because they don't know, do you have any concerns then over how potentially exposed your network might be to an attack? Or do you have any concerns, because obviously you don't know what's happening, how well your current provider is doing to helping your organization avoid a data breach? And so if they say yes then to either one of these questions, then this is where you can kind of follow up and say, all right, let's set up a time. We'll run you through our cyber security assessment process on your network, so we can see where there's gaps in your protection coverage that your existing MSP might have missed, might have overlooked, because we never really want to disparage our competitors. And because and through our assessment process, we're going to be able to provide you with a network health score, or whatever your tool whatever output your tool produces, so that you can confirm how well positioned your network is in avoiding an attack, as well as how quickly your organization could potentially recover should a data breach occur. And if anybody has looked at our Enable MDR that we launched a couple of months ago, you can use it as part of your assessment process, because you can actually deploy it over and above what other MSP might already have in place. So you can start catching things that the incumbent MSP hasn't caught or might have missed, which is very useful in creating urgency in your sales process, and is intel that you can then incorporate into your sales proposal if you're able to kind of get to that phase. Or again, use the cyber insurance angle to kind of spark the security conversation with the prospect, to again kind of demonstrate how you can use it to differentiate your MSP from others. So you can, ask your prospect, do they currently carry any cyber liability insurance for their business? Or does your MSP actually require that your organization carry cyber liability insurance? And might be a bit of a controversial slide, but I think this question alone is probably one of the best questions to ask to qualify out prospective customers pretty quickly. Because if they don't currently have cyber liability insurance in place, and they're telling you that they don't plan to purchase it, I really do see this as kind of a red flag to maybe stop pursuing them as a potential client, especially then if they kind of follow up and they tell you, that's why I'm hiring you. You're going to protect me. I don't need cyber liability insurance. And you may be laughing that I'm saying that, but MSPs have told me they've had prospects tell them that, I'm hiring you to protect me. That's on you. I don't need to, pay for insurance on top of that. And so this is where, hopefully maybe we can, use some education, some common sense to help them to acknowledge that this perspective is a little inaccurate, because this is where you do want to educate them on what your role is as the MSP when it comes to cybersecurity, and where your responsibilities lie, and where their role and responsibilities lie with respect to helping to avoid and recover from an attack should one occur. Because obviously their existing MSP has not had this type of conversation with them. Because as their MSP and as the MSP for your customers, your responsibility is to put in place the correct set of security measures to mitigate the chances of your customers falling victim to an attack. And then if they do happen to suffer an attack, because nothing's 100%, you can't guarantee that none of your customers are ever going to fall victim to an attack. But you have them all enrolled in your advanced security program, you have everyone standardized on that. So because of that, you'll then be able to recover, help them recover more quickly post-attack, and the goal is to really minimize the length of downtime that they'll experience. So that's your kind of role as the MSP. Their role is to carry the proper amount of cyber liability insurance coverage to help pay for the remediation services if they need be. Security is a shared responsibility. As the MSP, you don't own all of the risk because not all security incidents are preventable. So along with the security measures that you're putting in place for your customers via your advanced security program, having your customers carry sufficient liability insurance coverage, it's just that extra protection measure that all MSPs should require of their clients, because you can't stop everything, even with the best cyber hygiene controls in place. So if or when they do get attacked, they have that additional recourse on top of what you're doing as their MSP to kind of help them remediate and recover in the shortest period of time. And then in the event of the attack, the customer can file their claim and then not run into any issues getting that claim approved and paid, so they can compensate your MSP for that remediation work that has to be done. So if after this education, the prospect still kind of tells you no, that they're not going to buy it because they still think that that's on you, your responsibility, I would almost look at this as being a showstopper. And I would really consider ending that meeting and just telling them that, look, it doesn't appear that we're going to be a good fit for each other, and maybe they should look at either staying with their existing MSP or maybe look at another MSP, and just use this as an opportunity to differentiate how you operate. Explain that your MSP is run in a certain way where security is at the forefront of everything that you do, and while you respect their decision as it relates to their stance around security and compliance and cyber liability insurance, you can no longer take on 100% of your customers' risk because it just poses too much risk to your MSP. So this is where you can just kind of thank them for their time, their initial interest, and then move on. And by saying this, you may change the course there. You know, that statement alone, you telling them that you just run your MSP differently, that can go a long way in helping them kind of change their perspective, you know, of the prospect. And you may actually win the client over. I've had MSPs tell me that because they use this, or the customer or the prospect got to see that, wow, they do things differently. They feel very passionate about this. Maybe I should just do it, right? And maybe see how it's like to actually work with a real MSP versus an MSP that doesn't kind of have that security centric, that security focus. So although I'm suggesting that you do target your existing clients first, you know, because of the relationship that you have with them, this isn't to say that you're not going to get pushback from them. Many of your customers are not probably going to appreciate program changes being forced upon them, especially if those changes are going to result in a higher monthly bill. But with proper preparation, practice, you'll be able to present your rationale, and you're going to be able to provide a good response to really any objection that they may give you. So there's about 12 different objections, as I mentioned, that I've come up with, that I've heard, that MSPs have heard. I'm not going to go through all 12 today, just in the interest of time, but these are all going to be included in that selling security playbook that I'm putting together. So if I don't talk about one or two, it's fully documented in my playbook. But the idea for each of the responses that I am going to cover is take the objection and then talk about some potential responses. So for anyone that if you're hearing objection and there's a different response or a better response that you heard, that you dealt with, that kind of worked, and you're willing to share, I would love that feedback to get that incorporated in. Just put it into the question panel, send me an email, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I would love to kind of make this even more comprehensive in terms of scripting responses for common objections, because objections are probably the hardest thing for MSPs who aren't very sales focused to deal with. And that's the whole goal behind this particular bootcamp topic, is to try and make you more comfortable in handling objections, because objections aren't a bad thing. Objections are good. Objections mean that the customer is interested. They just have a couple of questions or some clarification points. So if we can kind of practice how we can respond, that can go a long ways in helping us move the deal forward to hopefully a new signed client in the end. So I'm going to combine objections 1 and 2 together because they are pretty much similar, but it's around this. I thought I was already protected. Are you saying that I'm not? Or another similar response, I thought you were already taking care of that. So some possible response could be, if you hear that, is to say, yes, you were protected. And yes, I was taking care of this for you. But as the threat landscape evolves, so does the technology that's needed to continue providing proper, comprehensive security coverage. So the services that I provide to my customers, they have to evolve as well to kind of keep ahead of the bad actors that are out there. This is just a business for them, and they're making a lot of money off of it as a result. Again, trying to throw stats in. In 2023, the average ransomware payment was 1.54 million, and it's almost double from what it was a year ago. But once you factor in a lot of the other costs beyond just the ransomware payment, it can be upwards of 7 times the basic ransom demand. So to ensure that this doesn't happen to you in your business, our security packages and what we offer has to change. And we need to now enforce stronger security measures, not just on ourselves as the MSP, but across all of our customers as well. Another objection that you might hear is, why can't I just stay the same? Why do I need to change my services that I have with you? And so again, kind of along the same lines as the first set of objections, but we want to educate our customer and continue to educate our customer and just say that, look, things are very different now than they were 3 to 5 years ago, you know, kind of that evolving threat landscape. Stats show that 60% of small and medium-sized businesses go out of business 6 months following an attack. And we do not want to be a contributing factor to that. So what we had recommended as security best practices, even last year, isn't what we are recommending to our clients today. And we are very likely going to have the same conversation again next year, where I might have to implement some new security services or make some changes as ransomware attacks, business email compromise, phishing tactics become more and more sophisticated. So again, as a result of this ever-changing threat landscape, as your MSP, I need to keep up to date, and I need to keep amending my recommendations to keep our customers' networks, their employees, their data as safe and secure as possible. And so I really like this talk track because we want to start setting the expectations that your services, if they remain static in the past, they're not going to remain static in the future like they used to be. You know, you want to now start going on the offense and start striving that my goal as the MSP, I want to be as proactive as possible. And so you really want to position this as a good thing. You want to emphasize and promote this as a way why you're different from other MSPs in the space out there. And so just to kind of put some illustrations around this, and if you attended part 1 of this bootcamp series, you would have seen me go through this example, but I think it does warrant it again for anybody that's new that might have missed the first bootcamp. Because again, the purpose of this slide is to really educate why the set of services that you're recommending today have to change from what you recommended previously, and how these new recommendations really have impacted the service packages that you're now bringing to market. So when we look at the customer journey, you know, when it comes to security, you know, 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, the traditional MSP's answer to security was AV, patch, firewall, backup. You know, at the time, those 4 services were fine. They provided pretty decent protection coverage. Threats weren't as sophisticated back then, and then people were working in offices behind corporate firewalls. And so the thought process was, as long as you have a good AV, you're fine. But we now know in today's threat landscape, that is no longer enough. So we want to kind of introduce this layered network diagram again when we're dealing with this type of objection, so that the customer can see that with the old approach of AV, patch, firewall, and backup, there are layers that are left underprotected, and there's layers that are completely unprotected. They're missing protection coverage altogether. And so here I'm talking about the cloud layer, the internet layer, and the people layer specifically. So you can see that there's significant gaps now in the customer's security coverage. So that old minimum standard for maybe what we called essential security 5 years ago, it has to be upgraded because we have to plug these gaps that have now surfaced. And so as a result, MSPs need to develop and promote more comprehensive set of security services to plug these gaps that are now being seen. And it has to move beyond just focusing on the endpoint, because there's all other layers that we need to focus on as well, because it's not always the endpoint that is the infiltration point for the bad guys. So, and I know this gets a little bit busy, but first what we're doing is replacing the traditional AV that was at the device level, and we're replacing that with like a next gen EV, like an endpoint detection and response, because we need to provide a broader, more advanced protection coverage against zero-day threats. EDR also has the added benefit of rollback capabilities so that you can get the device back to a pre-attack healthy state should something get through. And so this is where we're really starting to build in cyber resiliency services that are so needed now. It's just as important, I would probably say probably more important than threat prevention and detection. Prevention, yes, is key, but things will likely get through. And so we need to build in that resiliency piece so we can get that customer back to business as quickly as possible with as minimal damage as possible. So at the internet layer, we're looking at mail security now with email filtering and spam protection. We're looking at adding in web security with DNS, URL filtering, dark web monitoring. Network layer, you may want to look at adding in like some additional network discovery devices. We have our SentinelOne Ranger product that really will alert you to any new unknown devices that automatically just have appeared onto the network. Here I'm really thinking like IoT devices, camera systems, that type of thing. These devices might be trying to access the network, and so if they do, you'll get alerted, and then you can make the decision as to whether or not those devices are legit and should they be approved to be on the network or not. Because the whole idea with security is you can't secure and protect what you don't know about. And so you want to be alerted whenever a new device happens to get added onto the network. And at the people layer, this is where we're adding in kind of password management, MFA, we're adding in security user training as well, vulnerability management at the application layer, making sure that we're testing our backups. Maybe we have to input some standby systems now to ensure that all the data can be recovered should something, again, get through, because nothing is 100%. So we definitely need to make sure that we're including backup at all program levels, and then maybe adding in mail archiving as well. And then adding in the additional security benefits, that heightened visibility, that monitoring detection capability by wrapping an MDR, so a managed detection response service, because that's what's going to protect the cloud layer as well. Because not all breaches, 25% of them, are not caused by the human error. Attackers are now able to leverage system vulnerabilities to launch an attack and no longer require an end user just kind of clicking on something that they shouldn't to get into their network. So MSPs really now need to be mindful around how to avoid attacks that aren't user initiated, and they need to be prepared for and strategize how to protect their customers from those types of attacks as well. So it's really about kind of backing up the endpoint protection that we've included earlier in earlier programs by now wrapping this managed detection response service around it, so that those types of non-user initiated attack scenarios, we can be alerted and readily be made alerted to it. It sounds the alarm bells for that, so that you can then be quickly notified, and it's going to give you direction on how you're going to respond and begin remediation, because time is of the essence when there's a security attack. And then the benefit of wrapping kind of an MDR service around your advanced security bundle is then that all those different technologies at all those different layers, they get ingested into the SIM. And then that's what's going to be useful in helping to correlate events much more easily for forensics for the insurance company in the event that something happened. So basically, this is, kind of a complete picture that we need to show prospects and customers and how our security programs need to look today. And you can see how very different they are from what we were selling, 3, 4, 5 years ago. With this program, we're doing what we can to kind of effectively bubble wrap the organization and their employees and the network in order to protect their most important asset, which is their data. Okay. So objection 4, 5, again, kind of combine them together. Wow, this sounds very expensive. It's definitely more expensive compared to what I'm paying to, or maybe you have a customer that says, this doesn't really seem worth it to me. So definitely wow, this sounds really expensive. You're going to hear this, from your customers, as you begin speaking to them about your new security programs. And so it will be important to kind of role play and practice how you're going to respond to this. And I think a good approach is to demonstrate ROI here and just to try and get them to understand the true costs of a ransomware attack, because the true cost of a ransomware attack, it extends far beyond just that ransomware payment being demanded. There are a multitude of other costs that have to be factored in that we really need to highlight for them. And as far as overall costs go, experts actually estimate that ransomware, that payment only represents about 15% of the total cost of the entire ransomware attack. And there was a study that was actually completed by the firm Cybereason, and they found that of the 1,200 some odd respondents that they surveyed, 66% of them suffered significant revenue loss as a result of their cyber attack, and 53% reported significant brand damage. So the increase in the monthly cost of your new program, this is why you want to do an ROI with them, it's going to really be peanuts, compared to the costs that come from the customer getting breached, having their data wiped out, unrecoverable, potentially published, sold on the dark web. And so there is the high likelihood that they are going to experience significant financial hardships, or maybe even put out of business as a result of collateral damage and loss of reputation. So looking at how we can demonstrate ROI during a sales conversation to kind of overcome this pricing objection. And this is really kind of just one way to overcome the pricing objection. But, most businesses, you've heard me say this in the past, you guys, they already have an MSP that they're dealing with. And so the ROI conversation, it's no longer about illustrating the cost of downtime from an unmanaged network, but downtime, that conversation these days is likely going to come from a ransomware attack as a result of an underprotected network. So when you're trying to educate your customer about your new security, programs, and they're flinching at the cost of it, maybe take them through kind of this simple ROI to help them understand, again, why you are recommending what you're recommending, and to help them see what the true cost of a security attack or a breach is and the impact it can have on their business. Because as we go through this exercise, the goal that we're trying to prove is that it's cheaper to prevent than to pay out. So if you are dealing with break-fix customers still, or a la carte customers, or maybe you have customers that are in older packages, it's pretty much guaranteed that their networks are lacking key security products, services that are needed in today's threat climate. And if their network goes offline, it will likely be the result of some sort of cyber attack, which is going to impact their whole network lightly. So when you're calculating the daily ROI or the cost of downtime as a result of a cyber attack, the formula that I'm using here is lost productivity plus lost revenue plus cost to recover plus your cost of intangibles. And it's really the cost of the intangibles which we're going to focus on for this one, because these are the ones that we can't predict. But we really do want to highlight for our customer as we're speaking with them, because it's these intangible costs that's likely going to prevent or create that extension event for them, if the worst case scenario happens. So what you're seeing here is a screenshot of the downtime cost calculator that I put together that you can use to help demonstrate the true cost of a security incident as a result of a cyber attack. I have included this as a handout that you can download from the handout section If for some reason you're not seeing it or it's not downloading for you, just throw ROI calculator into the question panel and I'll be sure to get that over to you. So going through a sample, cost of downtime, ROI exercise. Again, the formula that we're relying on is downtime cost per day is lost productivity, lost revenue, plus the cost to recover and the cost of intangibles. So starting at the top, we're going to be calculating the employee lost productivity costs. So we're going to use an example here where we're dealing with an accounting firm. Let's say they have 40 employees. And the average wage cost across these 40 employees is about $50 an hour. And so let's say in our example that there's an employee there, he's clicking on something, he got a phishing email, and he just went and clicked on the link in that email, and that now has sparked this entire chain reaction that has now caused their entire network to become locked. And there's a message that pops up that they've been hacked and that their data has been ransomed. So no one can work now. 100% of their systems are now locked down. So depending on what security report you read, I've seen reports where they quote that the average length of downtime is anywhere from 3 weeks to 5 weeks. I was reading one the other day. It said the average length of downtime, excuse me, when a company experiences a ransomware attack is 30 days. So I'm going to use that number. So when we calculate the total number of downtime hours, I've calculated it by 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 4 weeks. So that gives us 160 hours. So right now, our employee lost productivity costs for this 40 user CPA firm is about $320,000. Now, in this exercise, I'm trying to keep the numbers as realistic as possible because even though the system could be offline for 30 days, I'm really basing the number of downtime hours on actual working days with employees in the office. And this may or may not be the case. You know, this number could be a lot higher depending on the time of year that this attack occurs. So if this CPA firm got hit in April or May, you may be working around the clock. They may have downtime around the clock because the employees are working around the clock. But again, I'm trying to be kind of conservative here, you know, with my 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 4 weeks to get to our 30 days. So now calculating our customers' lost revenue costs when a breach occurs. Let's say the customer's annual gross revenue is $1 million a year. Let's say the average number of working days per year is 240 days because there's some vacation in there, working 8 hours a day. And then let's say the percentage of lost business potentially irrecoverable. We're just putting that 100% because you can tell by, you know, the state of their network that they do have sufficient security measures in place. So calculating all of this, we can see that lost revenue for the duration of the outages is about $83,000. Then we want to calculate the remediation cost of your MSP or an MSP trying to get them back online because, you know, you want to try and help them avoid having to pay that ransom that's being asked. So going back and using our 160 hours of downtime, but again, this could be much higher if you're working around the clock for them or the employees are working around the clock because it's a busy time of year. I'm using a sample time material bill rate of $150 an hour. This could be higher if maybe you're using your top security engineers, which you likely might be in this type of instance. So total system recovery costs, which is basically your bill to the client, excuse me, is about $24,000. So your total cost of downtime, you know, when we add this all up, lost productivity, lost revenue, lost total cost remediation is about $427,000. And if we break that down onto an hourly rate, we're looking at around almost $2,700 an hour. But those aren't the only costs that the customer is going to have to take into account when they're dealing with an actual security breach. You know, as I mentioned, there are a variety of intangible costs that we're going to have to factor into our equation as well. And I have them highlighted here in the calculator. So, excuse me, ransomware payment. You know, if you're not able to get your client's data back, or if you're not able to get it back completely, then your customer's only other option might be to try their luck and pay the ransom. And so they're going to have to pay you to try to get their data back, and then they may also have to end up paying the bad guys as well in the hope that they're going to get their data back. But we all know bad guys don't normally play by the rules, so they could pay the ransom and they still may not get their data back. You know, that's something new that's coming out. And mentioned earlier that the average ransomware payment in 23, it's gone up, is now reported to be on average $1.54 million. So that's pretty significant. The customer can also be assessed regulatory fines. You know, depending on the industry, your customer could be assessed fines because they didn't take the proper precautions or invest in the proper security measures to protect their customers' personal data. You know, HIPAA fines, PCI, those governing bodies, they can assess their own fines to guilty parties. I know for HIPAA, fines can range anywhere from $120 per violation for like kind of a tier 1 lack of knowledge, all the way up to $60,000 per violation for a willful neglect that hasn't been corrected within 30 days. And if you've gone and if you've spoken to your customer about their under-secured, under-protected network and they get breached, that could be potentially classified as willful neglect because they were advised by you, but they decided not to heed your advice. And PCI has actually established fines for up to $500,000 per incident for security breaches when merchants are deemed non-compliant. Then we also have all those crisis communication costs and expenses. You know, for PCI, customers whose information is believed to have been compromised, they have to be notified in writing that they need to be on alert for fraudulent charges. So these are additional costs that need to be incurred for printing, posting of customer letters, all those HR costs needed to handle maybe customer complaints that come in afterwards. And this is keeping them from their normal, regular just duties of their job. There also could be attorney fees, other legal costs from class action lawsuits, settlements that are launched by aggrieved customers, you know, upon finding out that their data was stolen and it was compromised. You know, the sky's the limit on lawsuits, and what that could cost organizations could be tens of millions of dollars to settle some of those. Higher insurance premiums, larger deductibles will most certainly be levied by their insurance company after a cyber attack if they have insurance. Consultancy costs, employee training, security training. They didn't pay for it before, they're going to be paying for it now because employees need to be educated on what to look for so that they don't cause another breach like they did here. There's likely going to be infrastructure improvements that might be needed. Ransomware attacks generally expose vulnerabilities in an organization's security infrastructure, which may result in upgrades, new technologies that might need to be implemented to boost their cybersecurity protection coverage. They are going to have to be enrolled in your advanced security program to try and lessen the risk that this is going to happen again. Those are all costs that have to get factored in. There could be collateral damage. You know, this breach could potentially impact and cause harm to other organizations in that customer supplier chain that could have lasting damage. There's also the threat that they could be threatened again, and they can incur these costs all over again, because once hit, your customer is now on their radar, right? You know, if the customer doesn't make the investment to fix the underlying issues that kind of caused that attack in the first place, they could be subject to another attack. And then there's most definitely probably going to be reputational damage to their brand that could lead to loss of sales and loss of customers, because, you know, if it gets out there, you know what customers are going to want to bring their business to an organization where they've been breached. So when you kind of tally all of this up, a potential breach as a result of an unprotected or underprotected network could easily cost, you know, a customer in excess of $2 million. You know, when you factor in all of these really hard to calculate but expensive other costs. And IBM actually says that they found that an average cost of a ransomware attack, kind of taking in all of these intangible costs, is more to the tune of 4.62 million. And that doesn't even include the 1.5 million from the actual ransomware payment. So almost upwards over $6 million there. So when you look at it from an ROI perspective, your security program coming in at $250 a month for 40 users, yes, it may cost them 10 grand a month or 120 grand a year, but that's really nothing compared to what the security breach could cost them. That's well north of 2 million, upwards to 6, depending if we believe what the IBM survey is saying. Or it could cause them to lose their whole livelihood and the livelihood of their staff and their employees if that worst case scenario happens. So again, the whole idea of going through something like this is just to highlight that it is cheaper to prevent than to pay out. And that's why it's critically important that your customers have the proper protection, cyber resiliency measures in place, as well as sufficient cyber insurance to protect themselves and to protect their staff. And then that you as the MSP should be firm and enforce these new standards across your customer base. So another response that I'm sure you guys have all heard before, I can get this cheaper elsewhere, or the MSP, another MSP that I'm talking to, they're only charging X for this same service. And so this is where I really do want to caution that it's probably not the same service. They're probably not comparing apples to apples. My initial fear when I hear this type of objection is that the competitor's program is likely missing some key features, key services, and it's the lack of those key features that's really resulting in that price gap. Because remember, there's six layers now that need to be addressed when it comes to properly protecting an organization's employees and their data and keeping that all secure. We have the perimeter layer, the network layer, the end user layer, the application layer, the device layer, the cloud layer, like all of those layers need protecting as well. And so when you're developing your comprehensive security program, all 6 of those layers have to be considered. And each layer is going to require its own set of security tool sets, services, support for proper protection, coverage, and resiliency. So if a competitor is telling you or telling your customer that they can deliver a cybersecurity program for far less than what you're charging them, I'd be a little suspect as to what's actually being done across all 6 layers. Or is that other MSP severely underestimating the labor component involved in successfully delivering a program like that? Or are they significantly sacrificing margin and their overall profitability just to win this deal? And that's not sustainable moving forward. I want to deal with a business that's making money, not with a business that is just barely scraping by, because there may be a cheap entry price now, but they're going to raise it over time. Best-in-class MSPs are actually generating anywhere between 60 to 80% gross margin on their cybersecurity programs. Some are actually charging much more. And these programs should cost more than what you're delivering today. And MSPs should be charging a premium for security programs that they offer, because it's a shared responsibility, but at the end of the day, you're still taking on a lion's share of the risk and the responsibility for that data. So you shouldn't be afraid to charge appropriately for that, because it is still quite a responsibility that you're taking on. And so if you have an MSP or your customers telling you that they can get it cheaper from somewhere else, or another MSP is charging whatever, weaponize that, weaponize that competitor's lower price. This gives you a great opportunity to highlight not only how you are different and how your comprehensive tool set that you employ, the people that you employ, the qualifications that you possess, the processes that you follow, the partnerships that you invested in, are designed to help you follow the different compliance and security regulations that are out there, and you want to comply to them and you want to help your customers comply with them. And these are all critical. So if they're saying that, they can get it for $50 per user per month or whatever it is that they're quoting, that's just not possible given everything that's involved to deliver a program of that level, especially if they're in a regulated industry. So a possible response that you can give, when you hear I can get it cheaper elsewhere, you can say something like, our monthly fee reflects what's truly needed to properly protect, detect, remediate, and recover from cyber-related incidents for our customers. Proper risk mitigation, it's a combination of the right tool sets with the right processes, the people, the procedures, again, the partnerships. And I just worry that the price that you're being quoted doesn't really contain everything that's being recommended by compliance standards and cyber liability insurance providers today. Another possible objection or comment that you may hear, you may have a customer that comes back and says, well, like, do I need the whole package? Like, can I just remove some services so it can better fit my budget? Like, I don't need all of it, do I? And I really look at this as being another take on the, it's too expensive objection. And really my short answer is no. You do not want to allow your customers the opportunity to kind of pick away and remove services so they can better fit into a perceived technology budget. Because again, think back to how you designed your programs, right? There is going to be sticker shock, most definitely, especially if you haven't gone through an exercise like this with them before. But remember, who is the expert here? Who is living security day in and day out? It's not your non-technical business owner. So you can't let them dictate the path to support and allow their budget to dictate what they will and will not spend with you. So again, kind of going back to that layered security diagram and the 6 layers that surround your customers, employees, and the data, if you start allowing your customers to kind of pick apart, your advanced program or your essentials program, and they want to start removing services because of budgetary concerns, we're now creating gaps. We're creating holes in their protection coverage, and that's just going to increase the risk of some sort of malware or virus getting through. Because again, you've designed your programs so that each of those 6 layers has appropriate protection coverage so that you can build the strongest defense for your customers. And that's going to allow them to recover as quickly as possible when something does happen. Your goal with your program is you want to get everyone back to work as quickly as possible with minimal amounts of damage and minimal impact. So if price is a concern, especially if you do have kind of break-fix clients, time material, reactive clients, that's why we have that essentials security program. Again, there's a lot of trainers out there that say you should have one program only, everybody gets enrolled into that program, don't deviate. I really do think that there's room for 2. I don't agree with the good, better, best, but I do agree with a good minimum viable program, and you would use that program to enroll those types of organizations in, and then I have the best program. But if we have that minimum viable program, resist the urge, be disciplined not to pull services out and sell below that. Because if you do begin to erode your minimum tier to fit some sort of preconceived price point, again, this is where we're opening the door to increase risk and liability for yourself and for your MSP. Because not only are there costs to the customer by refusing to elevate their security posture, and we kind of went through that with our ROI exercise a couple objections back, but when we look at the other side of the coin, there's cost to your MSP as well if you don't enforce a baseline set of security standards on your customers. And the first being loss of revenue. With average remediation time of 30 days, costing, from our example, $24,000 or more, depending, this is a significant unexpected cost to a small business. And I have seen too many times where MSPs will heavily discount this bill or they'll waive it altogether because they just feel bad that their customer got infected. So lots of revenue there. And then just like a customer who gets breached may experience a loss in reputation, depending on how it plays out, you as the MSP could also experience a reputation loss as well and become known as the MSP who allowed a breach to happen. And this could be especially harmful if you are in an industry-specific MSP, because we know how quickly word can travel. And in some cases, you could be fined or sued by an organization if the loss or the breach was significant. You could be found to be negligent or liable, and that could maybe roll into being an extinction event for your MSP. There was just a story that came out in March about a Californian MSP who was being sued or is being sued by one of their legal firm clients because the legal firm client experienced a cyber attack and it ended up shutting down all of their systems. And they felt that it was their MSP's fault because their MSP didn't do enough to protect them from that. And so now they're suing for more than $1 million in damages because of that. So are you prepared to kind of put your MSP at risk and potentially lose your livelihood and the livelihood of your employees, all because you have a customer that won't accept your security recommendations and pay for what is now needed. Because if anybody's read the story and the little bit that's come out, it doesn't sound like that legal firm had all the necessary protection measures in place. Now, was it because they said no to their MSP when the MSP came and had that conversation? Or maybe that MSP didn't have the conversation at all. So that's why it's so critical that if you're not scheduling your EBRs, your executive business reviews, that you get on that you have these types of conversations, especially if you know you have customers that deviate from what your advanced security package looks like. Then there also could be opportunity costs as a result of loss of other potential business that you might have been able to generate for your MSP during this time. There's the risk that you can end up getting pulled into a nasty breach for your customer, maybe because you allowed them to deviate from your standard security package, and that's very likely is going to kind of pull away your most experienced techs, because you're going to want to help them clean up and get back to business as quickly as possible. And if you do this, you may run the risk of not having anyone else who can then go and support your clients, or you might have to go and postpone projects or decline other more valuable, more profitable work because you just don't have the bodies available right now, because you have your best technical resources working to help the affected partner recover from that breach. And so this could result in possible customer dissatisfaction because you're making them wait until this impacted customer is back on their feet again. And then just from an operational perspective, if you're allowing customers to kind of create bespoke programs and remove services from your minimum bundle, this is just going to make it increasingly more and more difficult to track, to build, to support, to manage, to onboard, all of those customers on a day-to-day basis, because every client's going to be a little bit different. And so your MSP is going to lose out on all of those service optimization efficiency benefits that you get from program standardization, and it's just going to make it more difficult for you to scale and to scale efficiently. So a sample response that you can give if you hear this, again, kind of using a stat. Oh, sorry, you want to go back to the previous slide. What slide, Mario? I'm not sure what slide you want me to go back to. Not sure. Either way, this is all going to be in the, this one. Okay, perfect. Yeah, take a screenshot. Perfect. Again, this is all going to be in that selling security playbook as well, but hopefully that worked. Perfect. So again, just kind of reusing the stat from before, 60% of small and medium-sized businesses go under, 6 months following attack. This is a fate that we do not want to happen to any of our customers. We've designed our security programs to ensure that every layer that sits between your employees and the data that they're accessing in the kind of the outside world is properly protected. And if we start removing a service, we're creating holes. And that's just increasing the odds of something getting in and you falling victim to that attack. And so again, we want to go back and kind of reference our layered security diagram to help illustrate this fact. 9 and 10, again, I'm combining them together. You probably have customers telling you, you've probably heard this, yeah, it's not going to happen to us. We're too small. We've never been breached before. Or they may say, you know what, it's not going to happen to us. Like, who seriously would ever want our data? So my answer to this is security through obscurity is not a security strategy for smaller businesses. And this was a phrase that was cited on a webinar that we held recently, where my colleague Chris Massey from the Business Transformation Group, he was interviewing Charles Weaver from MSP Alliance. And this was just one of the insightful nuggets. I always love hearing Charles speak, but this was just one of the insightful nuggets that he provided during that webinar. He emphasized that security through obscurity is not a security strategy for smaller businesses. Just because you're small doesn't mean you can't be seen. And so a customer hoping that they're not going to get breached because of their size or the fact that they've never been breached before, that's just not a protection strategy that you can support. And you can't accept these objections as credible reasons around not enforcing your security standards onto your smaller customers. Because really, the size of the business these days doesn't really matter. You know, CISA is finding that smaller businesses are actually 3 times more likely and they're more at risk of being attacked than larger ones. And so the idea here is that everyone is open to being attacked. No business is immune. Now, it may be true that the business might not be the intended target. Maybe the bad actors want to access, you know, the supplier or the vendor of the customer that they do business with. So this customer could just be, even though they're small, they might just be that potential gateway to those other more desirable vendors. So in this instance, we really, again, educate the client that on this possibility, explain to them that although they may think an attack may never happen to them, the current state of their network does not meet your new security standards that you've set for all customers. And you have to be allowed to harden their network. You have to be allowed to harden their security so that they cannot be a weak link in your chain to their suppliers, business partners, and for yourself as the MSP. Because if one of their suppliers or partner vendors is attacked, and it's discovered that it was the bad actors were able to get in because they were able to access their network through one of their partners, that customer will be dropped. And that's going to result in a huge loss of revenue for them, as well as ramifications of loss of reputation, trust, respect within the marketplace, which again could lead, worst case scenario, to a possible extinction event for those. And if you do have clients that are pushing back and telling you that, honestly, who would want our data? Like, our data is not nothing. Your response is that the bad guys, they actually could care less about your data. So you're right, they don't want your data. It's the ransomware money is what they want. It's all about the money, but they know that you care about your data. And that's what they're preying on, because again, this is just a business to them. And if they're looking for easy targets and quick wins, it's those smaller clients that they're targeting, because they've been allowed to operate the way they've been allowed to operate for so long, because their MSPs aren't really enforcing their security standards on them. And so they're creating these fantastic opportunities for the bad guys. And so a sample response that you can give if they're telling you this, you know, we're too small, we've never been breached, who would want our data, is you can say that cyber attacks against small businesses have actually been on the rise in recent years because of the perception that security in small businesses is pretty lax. So it's making them attractive prey. In fact, certain types of attacks, social engineering attacks, phishing attacks, they're more commonly aimed at smaller businesses who are the ones that are not getting the security training for their end users. Again, always stats are good. Did you know 61% of SMBs are the target of cyber attacks in 2021? 37% of those ransomware attacks were against small, medium-sized businesses that had less than 100 employees. And the sad part is that it's generally the smaller businesses, they're just not financially prepared for an attack, because a lot of them are also lacking cyber insurance. So as a result, a successful attack against a smaller organization could potentially put them out of business. And that's what we're trying to avoid with our security package that we're talking to you about today. Or you may have a customer that just says, yeah, no, I'm not going to pay. I just want to stay in the program that I am. I don't want to switch to the new program. And so this is where you really want to think about how do you respond to this type of pushback, because if you haven't heard it yet, you can almost guarantee that you are going to hear this type of response, and we do want to think about how we're going to handle it. So this response actually comes from, gosh, a LinkedIn post that I read a couple of years ago, and this is really kind of how one MSP kind of said how he handles it. And he basically says, you know, pretend that the customer that's telling you that they're not switching, they're not going to pay for these services, is a lawyer or a healthcare client of yours. They're the ones that are giving you this pushback. You know, you could say something like, Mr. Customer, your job is to protect your clients, so is mine, but you're not letting me do my job by refusing to enroll in one of my new security packages that I've developed to better protect my customers. And so I really feel that you're not taking my job as your cybersecurity, your technology advisor seriously when I bring recommendations like this to you that's aimed to really protect your employees and your business. So I'm asking for you to sign this new agreement for our new cybersecurity program that we were really standardizing all of our clients on moving forward. And if the customer is still kind of giving you pushback, maybe they're just not ready to sign at this meeting, then maybe just ask as a follow-up, if you can't sign today, then when? Is this something that we can maybe sign in the next 60 to 90 days or so? And then hopefully with this response, they might seriously reconsider what you're asking them. Maybe they do appreciate giving them a little bit smaller time, which I get it, it makes sense, to get used to kind of these new ideas that you are implementing. And then if they still refuse to sign, they're not going to enroll in your new security program. There needs to be a plan in place and some thought made to how are you going to turn these really risky clients into less risk for your organization? Because again, no customer should be allowed to be a threat to your livelihood or to the livelihood of your employees. And so we talked about this a little bit ago in the first section, have your new master service agreement and then include some clauses in there that has some sort of limited liability waiver or has some sort of limited liability clause or release a liability clause added into it. Have them also look at signing a risk acceptance letter, acknowledgement of the new rate schedule, the new SLO that's outlining what the new rates and what the response times are going to be. Typically, we see reactive rates for these non-standard clients, which is really what this customer would be turned into if you allowed it, that are double or even triple an MSP standard time material rate. And the response times are longer because other clients who are under the standard security program, those are the ones that get priority. And so you really want to make them aware of how they're going to be treated moving forward, because it is of the utmost importance to remove that risk from your MSP as much as you can. And by having customers at least sign these documents, that's what's going to show proof to the insurance company, to the forensic auditors, that you did attempt to have the security, the risk compliance conversation with them, but the customer turned you down. They refused your coverage that you were offering. And so you want to be able to demonstrate this in the event that the insurance company, they're going to be looking for someone to blame. And so they don't want them coming after you. So before the question pops up, I always get asked this. Unfortunately, I don't have any sample master services agreements or risk acceptance letters that I can send over. As an example, the reason being is that our legal firm won't allow me to. They just feel that there's too much risk to enable by providing those types of documents to our partners, because at the end of the day, we are just a vendor of you. So, but if you Google, there's always lots of different examples out there. Use those examples and then work with your own legal counsel to get those clauses into your new master services agreement if you don't have anything in effect like that already. And then if your customer still won't sign your new agreement, what do you do now? Here, I feel strongly that they don't respect you as their IT partner. And here, I feel that they are not a good fit for your business. I'm a big proponent of building a good book of business for your MSP. And so, controversial as it may be, my recommendation is, and this, I can appreciate that this would be tough, is to be open and tell your prospect, tell your customer that you can no longer afford to accept their risk and keep them on as a client, because they are posing too much risk to your MSP and to your existing customers. And so you can no longer keep them on as a client, but you'd be very happy to work with whatever MSP they decide to choose and move forward with. And you would be more than happy to help with that transition over to them. And so you can say something like, Mr. Customer, Mr. Prospect, I respect your decision, but unfortunately, this is just not something we can support because it poses just too much risk that we do not want to be associated with. Our job is to protect our clients, protect their business, and by not enrolling in our recommended security program, you're hampering our ability to do so, and you're hampering our ability to do what's needed to protect you according to industry security compliance best practices. So in this instance, I do feel that you might be better suited to work with another MSP who does not align themselves to the recommended security standards like we do. And maybe just give that a moment for them to soak in. Whatever they decide, let that decision be. But you do need to bring this situation to a close sooner rather than later. I really encourage you not to let this extend beyond maybe 60 days, 90 days at the most, because you're just going to keep putting yourself and your business at risk. The risk of a ransomware event happening is just too high in this day and age, and the consequences could be pretty dire. From partners, MSPs that I've talked to over the years that have gone through this, it's not as scary as you might be thinking it is. They have said time and time again that and I've had a partner tell me that when they went through this, I think 92%, because they tracked it, he said 92% of our customers, once we told them this, they ended up signing with us. Because once we told them that we can no longer accept them or support them as a client, but we would be happy to move them over to another MSP, they didn't want to go through that. They didn't have the energy to go and try and find another provider and replace them, and they ended up signing the new agreement. But for those MSPs where their customers said, yeah, I'm going to go shop the market, that's not a bad thing. Hopefully they will find, and other MSPs that they talk to, they're giving the same message like you are, that they are enforcing the high security standards like you are, which is just going to kind of reinforce the stance that you're holding, and again, help educate the client that this is just the way it is now. And so just to wrap things up, again, I referenced it a little bit ago, but if you haven't kind of read or been following that story about the MSP in California that is being sued by one of their legal customers for more than $1 million, it is a really interesting story to follow, because the customer is feeling that it's the MSP's fault, that their MSP failed to put in the proper protection measures, and as a result, they fell victim to this ransomware attack that kind of took their systems down and caused them a great deal of harm. So kind of reading through the article, if you haven't read it yet, and there wasn't a whole lot that came out, but enough, they feel that the attack started when the firm experienced a major outage of its systems, and that caused them to lose access to their servers and their data. And that was when the ransom demand was made by the attacker. And then when the law firm attempted to recover its data from the backup system, that's when they discovered that their data backup was destroyed. It had been deleted. And the investigation revealed that it looked like it was access credentials that had been compromised outside of their systems. And it was those credentials that were then used to delete the firm's backups, and then they were used to execute the ransomware attack. Right now, the forensics aren't sure if the attack group actually exfiltrated data from that legal firm, but if data was first exfiltrated, then that could actually lead to liability for the legal firm itself. So they're trying to sue their MSP, but their clients, if their clients find out, this legal firm could be named in a lawsuit by their clients if any of their clients end up being exposed to any sort of damaging exposure as a result of this event. And then compounding this issue, it appears that there was only an oral agreement in place between the MSP and the law firm client, and that the MSP actually didn't have a contract in place. And so was this client actually maybe just a time material customer where maybe there wasn't a contract in place because there was no actual formal agreement? So it actually brings up a lot of gray area there as to what is an MSP's responsibility if they have a client that's only time material. So that's really why it's important that all MSPs have contracts in place. I've had MSPs say, yeah, you know what, and take pride. We don't have contracts. We allow our customers just to kind of leave us if they want to. But this scenario is really proving how important it is to have proper contracts in place that spell out your role and responsibility as their MSP, but also how important it is that you're having regular conversations with your customers, especially as it relates to security, because there's obviously miscommunication here. something was missed between the customer thought that they were properly protected. The MSP didn't have the right protection measures in place. So that gap, those deficiencies need to be discussed. So the article went on to say that this case is likely the first of its kind, but you can absolutely guarantee that it is not going to be the last. So just wanted to leave you with these final thoughts. If you're thinking about your own situation, looking at your own MSP practice, how easily could this happen to you? Have you done an honest assessment of your own organization? Do you recognize the gaps in your own MSP operations that maybe they could lead to you actually getting exposed or having this kind of liability, should one of your customers experience a breach, and then maybe they want to turn around and blame you. And MSPs really need to start thinking about their security posture, the security posture of their customers, to protect them from this kind of liability. And this really just comes down to having that confidence to take ownership of the security and the risk and the compliance conversation with their customers and their prospects. Because in the case of that law firm, they already thought that they were being covered. They already thought that their MSP was handling all of this for them. So if you know that you're not, then this is your opportunity to update your programs, build out your proper SOPs, get your proper MSAs in place that detail your roles and responsibilities, get your pricing together, and then practice your messaging on how you're going to talk to customers, and then be ready to handle the pushback that you're going to receive. Because I do feel that this ultimately, we're at a time where this is a tell, don't sell type of sales strategy here. So really kind of believe in the security programs that you've built, go speak to your customers and get them upgraded, and work at building a better book of business, and think about how you're going to handle it if a customer is going to push back on you. All right, so that kind of brings up the conclusion of this three-part series. So this was pretty much a brand new boot camp in terms of the content. So if there was any extra responses or advice, or maybe some improvements that I can make to some of the responses, always love to get that kind of feedback from you, because again, you just spent pretty much 90 minutes with me. If you've attended all 3 of my boot camps, you've spent probably over 6 hours with me, so I absolutely appreciate it. So getting that kind of feedback just allows me to kind of build and maintain good quality material for you. Okay. Perfect. So looking at what's coming up next, again, this is the conclusion of this 3-part series focused on building, selling, pricing, marketing programs to traditional managed services clients. If you missed 1 and 2, then just let me know. I don't think they're posted to Enable You yet, but I can send you the recordings. They're raw, but I can send you the recordings. If you're interested in retaking this boot camp again, just let me know. I can send you the recording as well, allow you to kind of fast forward through some of my ramblings sometime. Really think about if programs need to be redesigned, take that on, and then go and talk to your existing clients. If you know that you have clients that are kind of deviating from what you're doing today, and then familiarize yourself, if you haven't already, with the common most compliance regulations that are out there. And as always, if you have any questions, register for my monthly office hours, work with your PSM, send me an email, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll do my best to help. So coming up next is we're moving into co-managed, kind of the same process, except we're dealing with clients where there are internal IT, so it is a very different process, program design, methodology, pricing, sales. So coming up in May, later on this month, 2 programs really dedicated towards this, if co-managed is where you want to move into. And so just the QR code there for you to register for those boot camps. Office hours are coming up May 14th, June 18th, and then you can see the different boot camps that are coming up in the month of May and June. So May, again, was really focused on co-managed. June is really focusing on marketing and lead gen. How do you build those lead gen strategies? How do you fill the pipeline with prospects so we can sell our programs to them? All right, so thank you again, everyone, for taking time again out of your day, out of your week to listen to this latest bootcamp. I do feel that hopefully you got some good nuggets out of it. Again, you want to connect, email address, LinkedIn, don't hesitate to reach out. Have a great rest of the day and a good weekend. Thanks, everyone. Bye.